stuff today. I need to remind myself, I think, Marco, you can take credit for this, right? You've collated all these time tracking related issues together.
Not really, because I think Gabe was the one that put together this epic, but
Oh, okay. In which case, thank you, Gabe.
Yeah, I need to tidy it up, but yeah.
And there might be some duplication. I know you've looked at a few of these, Mark. I've looked at a few of these, etc. And
yeah,
I wanted to just look at this one in particular because apparently this Figma prototype is awesome. But let's have a poke. Wow, is it this slow when you load it? Oh no, it's loaded, right?
Yeah, you need to click on the plus on the set estimate.
Yeah, if you click in the screen, it's an interactive one. So it'll highlight blue things that you can click.
Okay, perfect. Right, so okay, yeah, this is about improving the way, because at the moment you can only log time through quick actions and the API. So this will allow you to do something. Wow, I wonder how you have to. I guess you just tell it the buttons you want to be clickable, right? So you can update the estimate. Okay, cool. Yeah. So this was all part of the super duper. Awesome.
I think the first thing would just be to get that little pop-up in the sidebar.
Well, the one that I actually wanted to have a quick look at this and remind myself of this cool stuff. And I love like all these improvements to the time tracking report, and yeah, definitely being able to submit them as well. The MR that I started a couple of months ago, just when I had a bit of a free time that I haven't had any since, was to abstract, if that's the right reason. No, the right term, sorry. This from the issuable to more of a kind of reusable component or a global component. So at the moment, it's great being able to view time tracking for a single issue, but obviously if we want to be able to view it for an individual or a project or a group or some other weird range, then what we've currently got is very limited. So I just started throwing together, or seeing if we could throw together something at a higher level, and then just have kind of filters for the various bits and pieces. And this is pretty much what would I call it, a blocker for us in terms of migrating issues over from our current product onto GitLab. We can't really do it without the ability to run, it's very most basic, be able to see what have I logged today. But on a bigger level, at the end of the month, when it comes to raising invoices and sending timesheets to clients, etc., we
so
can't.
That screenshot you've got there, is that actually where the merge request is at?
Yes, I'm going to pull this down.
And is that limited to instance reporting, or is that also available for groups and or projects? Because the URL in the address bar is a thing, an instance URL.
Yeah, I think it should be available at instance level. If you particularly wanted to, maybe, like GitLab would be a perfect example, right? They've got GitLab or GitLab.com, and they wouldn't want to have to run different reports potentially across those groups.
But for the SaaS version, you would want to be able to go to gitlab.com/group/Andrew Smith/time logs or something.
Yeah, I guess so,
Yeah.
and that would probably like redirect. It'd just be the same component, I guess, but with the group hard coded, like so you
Yeah.
couldn't, you know. But I felt that initially it made more sense to do it at this level. So, 10,000 commits behind.
Oh, wow. Another little thing. Since we do have that Figma design, I wonder if we could make that table component reusable for the report page you have there and the pop-up when you view a report for a particular issuable.
Yeah, so what I don't know if Marco suggested this or mentioned this, or I kind of guessed it, or I think Marco mentioned it at some point. So the rather lame design that I was using, just to get things working with text boxes, I've subsequently implemented the let's call it a revamp on the UI for contacts. And this is a nice component we've already got in GitLab that so it embeds a GL table. So, and we get all the sorting that we need. Tabs. So I'm not sure what we might use tabs for on time tracking at the moment. But we might come up with something. Maybe billable time versus non-billable time, or
Might be.
or maybe the different time categories or something like that. And searching as well, and this supports tokenization. So what I think would be super awesome to do, and what Marco thinks would be super awesome as well, would be, instead of having all these boxes, to use this kind of magic search bar like we have for issues and merge requests and other things.
So then in the filter you type in organization equals GitLab
Exactly.
org rather than having that text field. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. So
yeah, my thinking was with the design is to potentially have a bit more work up front, but to reduce tech debt in the future.
So that's the only thing with. Let's get the Figma back up. So I'm just wondering which bit of it, a bit of the Figma it was that you were liking that we could still.
It's when you click on, I think it's like view time log report or something. So if you set an estimate, that's one. Yeah. So this one.
So this bit.
Yeah, it's actually a lot more cut down than yours, isn't it? I think.
Yeah. The thing is, and I think we might be able to use it, but it's tricky because GitLab's approach isn't always the same approach I'd have. Sometimes if there's quite a lot of reuse, they'd still prefer like the verbosity, if that makes sense. But yeah, I would love to make it so that we use this and we can pass it a parameter or slots or something so that it says, oh, you're running me for a group. Well, I don't need to show you the group box and I don't need to show you the group column.
Yeah. Because I think actually, yeah, because what have you got? Ticket, spent at, use. Yeah, they're basically the same columns, aren't they? Yeah, and then if you're viewing it in an issuable, you would just not show organization, project, and group.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I'm thinking. Yeah. So, did I kick off my rebase? Oh, conflicts.
Yeah, it should be on the project. Oh no.
Okay, don't care about.
You'll care about the roots, won't you?
I will, yeah.
Yeah.
Why can't I? Because I can't spell. Did you want me to do a live share link for this as well, by the way?
Yeah, you can do. Why not?
Yeah.
Will it work today? Okay, looks
My
promising.
cursor's
Come on. Right. Send it to anyone you trust. Okay, so what has it done here? I have no idea.
Do you know what changes you made?
I think it's easier to look at the MR because I think I probably added like
yeah.
one simple line, so I probably accept the new version and just re-implement my change. Hello, lag. Where are you? Right, here we go. Yeah, one simple new route at the end of // scope. So I want to accept. Even this hasn't worked, right? Where's my nice funky accept options?
I noticed I'd lost mine as well. I think it was an update to VS Code and it's broken a plugin or something.
Man. So
It's
what
really
do I want to do?
We have no idea what you're typing. It's all under our faces.
Under our heads. Okay. Can I do? No, because it shrinks it though. I don't like that it shrinks it. So
just get rid of our heads. Or shrinkify.
I don't know that I can actually. No.
Whoa!
Hey.
Definitely the wrong one there.
But the only thing, can I like dock this on a different side of the screen or something? I honestly, yeah, but if I resize VS, what if I get rid of the sidebar? Then can you see enough? Just about.
No, not really.
Oh well, I'm not doing anything exciting. Oh, you can see this in
on
the live share.
Yeah. I completely forgot to click that link.
It's still loading, so I don't know if I have some network problems.
Open.
So I think I can just add that.
Oh, it's loading now. Maybe.
Everything goes a million times slower when it's being watched, right?
Yeah.
Can I? Yeah.
Can I create?
Awesome. Well, it seems happy. Now let's see if it runs.
Oh, I need to sign in.
So.
Do that. No. Time logs.
Oh, yeah. Live share is working for me now.
Just going to find a link while we're waiting for GDK.
I can't sign in.
Nice.
Could not connect to the server.
Webpack is supposedly loading. So yeah, one of the realizations that I had maybe yesterday, when I thought about using the new component to render the time log report, is that in order to support pagination, amongst other things, we need to add sorting to the back end, and at the moment the sorting's done on the front end. And to be honest, we need pagination for our time tracking reports anyway. At the moment, as soon as you log more than 100 time logs on an issue, it won't show anymore. So we need it anyway. But the cool thing is that I've just done an MR in the back end to add sorting and pagination and stuff for some other endpoint. So adding it to this one shouldn't be too painful. I guess I've got a new database since I last ran this.
Oh, so you don't have any time log?
That's what I'm assuming, but let's try adding one.
Oh, now that I have all the backend sorted out, I'm gonna be adding the add time log pop-up so we can skip the quick actions.
Awesome. So you're working on that adding, and
Yeah.
that will allow you to implement the categories as well, right?
Yeah, well, for the categories, there's still some things needed, but yeah, at least adding a time logger through the UI would be.
We still need the CRUD, the sort of create list.
Yeah, that, and also actually create the UI to manage the time tracking labels.
Yeah.
Yeah, but at least we can create time logs.
Why GDK are you so slow? I even did a reboot this morning thinking, yeah, that'll improve things. Oh, good.
He doesn't like being watched.
Too right. Oh, it's coming back to life now. Stay. I saw RFC. I hope it's public for. Let me just check it is. Yeah, I'm sure it is. For maybe switching from Webpack to Vite, which I think is the new kind of recommended view, whatever it's called.
Builder, is it?
Yeah, maybe.
Compiler, transpiler.
Yeah,
transpiler, maybe.
Babel's the transpiler, isn't it, actually? That's...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
This is ridiculous. I think I should go back to my old laptop and Windows.
You said the magic words.
What on earth it's doing?
Can you disable that Webpack compilation thing?
You can, but it just makes everything even slower because it has to recompile the whole thing rather than just the individual component.
I prefer it. I'd rather it just build everything. I always had issues with that. Just in time compiling.
Maybe I will try switching it off. Come on.
You can do it.
40 minutes to get the bloody environment set up. 5 minutes of actual coding, I suspect. Should have used Gitpod, to be fair. Tell you what, I can at least push. No, do I want to push? Yeah, I want to push. Push the rebase, and then no doubt there'll be loads of lint and RubyCop errors. And
That's for sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
And now I've hit refresh, so it's not, but it's working at least. But yeah, what I thought we could focus on is having a look what we need on the back end, so I can start working on the back end changes, and because the front end's kind of worthless without the end. So the 2 merge requests that I shared a minute ago. Here's one I prepared earlier. Was what I had to do to add it to CRM contacts. So we should be able to kind of say, oh, okay, well, if there's not a finder, we need to create a finder. If there is a finder, we need to tweak it to support counts to improve the sorting. What do we need to do to the resolver? We need to create a resolver for counts because counts definitely won't exist. We need to update the existing resolver to handle the sorting. We possibly need to implement some conditional offset pagination. This is not going to be trivial, but it's going to be fairly copy pasta, so it's all good. We need a new sort enum. We need a new type for the counts. Context state enum. Although, do we think we need tabs or not? Should we start without
the only tab that may make sense would be billable versus not billable, but then we can have that on a filter.
Is that tracked though? I'm not sure how the time logs work.
Tracked via the categories at the moment, which are kind of semi-live, if that makes sense.
But you can could you have multiple categories that are all billable categories?
Yeah.
Yes.
And do you configure a category as being a billable category?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so billable is a property of the category model.
Yeah, I mean, that could be a filter. That would make sense for tabs as well. I was thinking similar to most of the other places where you could have all closed and open. I don't know.
Don't have closed and open time logs.
Not on time.
On issues,
time logs, but on
Oh,
like
so you're thinking, okay.
If an issue is still open, do you count the billable time, or do you only count the billable time once the issue that time belongs to has been closed?
So it's a really good question, and the answer is it depends on our client. The problem is that we would have to completely change the way this worked if we wanted to do that, because if you were doing it based on when an issue was closed, then you would need to show all of the time logs based on when the issue was closed, not based on when the time logs were added. So that's an interesting challenge that I think is worth us maybe recording on here.
I should say I don't use time logging. I don't think we have any plans to use time logging, so I'm not sure how this is intended to work for most use cases.
Issues. Say when the work is completed. E.g. issues. Might be good in a future iteration. Yeah, that's a really good idea, Chris. That's lurking. Suggest build versus not build, as opposed to billable versus not billable, which would actually work really, really well for our use case and scenario. Apart from the fact that there's currently no way to track that, But if we were to add a build flag to a time log, that would be awesome, because that's a challenge that we really face at the moment. When we like, if we've got something that lasts, so if we have a piece of work that takes like a day, we do it, we bill at the end of the month, it's all good. If we have an ongoing piece of work that we bill some time this month and some time next month, etc., sometimes I struggle to figure out, well, what have I already billed, what haven't I already billed? So that would be super awesome, but again, it can't be done. So I think no tabs might be the sort of first iteration, which might be super awesome. It may or may not, because
but also the build versus not build is tied to the fact on how you actually build, because maybe you want to build when the issue or is completely closed, so the flag should be on the issue, or should the flag be on each time log? Because if you have to mark every time log to be build or not build, that's gonna be quite.
I would say it should be on the time log, but you should be able to, let's say, use this report to mark everything as build. So I'm running my time log for a client for a specific project or for a time range, or however I want to do it. Maybe I'm multi-selecting the ones I want to bill, and then I'm hitting bill and that then. But yeah, that's a bit further down the line, right? What I'm interested to know is, if we don't want tabs, does it therefore mean we can't use that component that I was hoping to use? Does that matter? Do we care? So I guess maybe.
Well, that's all front end, but in any case, we will need pagination, sorting, and all those kind of things at some point. So maybe it's still worth to make the backend changes.
Okay, let's start with something simple then.
Can you not disable tabs on the component? Is it not like a property?
Probably that you pass it a list of tabs. So I don't know if you could pass it like empty array or an empty object. Have to try.
Or you just have a single tab that says all to start with.
Yeah, if we wanted to do that, we would still need to create the counts endpoints.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Value stream analytics toggle history. Search bar, no tabs.
Where do I get a value stream analytics? It's in here somewhere, isn't it? Here we go. Ideally, I don't want it on GDK, right? Because it's just going to be super slow. Awesome. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, this is bang on. But is it using the component? My guess is probably. Oh, it is. What's the easiest way for me to find that out?
We don't have view inspector in here.
Value stream analytics. This is where
the search bar is also a bit custom. So
right. I don't suppose you're snooping in my. No, you're not. Well, not that I can see anyway. No, I hoped one of you beat me to the component. So there's always. Here we go. That'll be what we want. VSA filter bar.
No, it's custom.
Yeah. And that's
What's the component name?
the paginated table with this one that I want to use. You mean? Or...
Oh boy, paginated table with search bar and tabs. Well, it's self-explanatory.
It might even be easier for me to check out another branch I was just working on and try removing the tabs.
Well, isn't it documented on the GitLab UI repo?
It's not a GitLab UI component. It's just a GitLab component.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I agree. Implement it with the all tab. That way, we have to create the models and the components and the back-end counting stuff and everything that we need. And when we decide how we want to tab, then we just can change that rather than having to kind of, almost not start from scratch, but go back to.
I think something like the tab counts are going to be a useful feature regardless, aren't they?
Yep, absolutely. Awesome. Okay. Again, with the 5-10 minutes that we've got left. No, I could start. So yeah, here's one I prepared earlier. So where I thought I still had it open, but find my link. Did I? I probably did it in this window, right? Yes, this was it, wasn't it? So, yeah, it's just a question of where to start, really. I guess let's see if there's already a time logs finder.
Tabs are required.
It's not a finder. So I think that seems like a logical place to start. We created a time logs have some kind of weird namespace now, right?
Yeah. It's under the time tracking folder.
So is that in?
Doesn't have any finder, so that's
whereabouts. Where does it exist at the moment?
Under GraphQL, maybe. Yeah, it should be there.
At GraphQL types time tracking. Yeah, cool. Awesome. Time category type. Perfect. Cool. Okay, so finders. Where are you? Finders. Remember, do we pluralize them? Yes, apparently we do. Although I wouldn't be surprised if there's a bit of. No, yeah, we do.
I think you've named that wrong.
What? Because I put a / instead of a backslash.
Yeah, you're not on Windows anymore.
Yes, indeed. So I'm just going to steal my contacts finder. And I got a bit too carried away there. Right, so time tracking, time logs, finder. What on earth is allowable? Let's do. So counts by state. What do we think about just having counts for the moment, as we don't know what we're going to be counting by?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So current user and params. So that's good. Current user execute the count. Thank you, Marco. Initialize does that. Execute. So what do we think we're gonna? You can start. So we think. Nice. I'm thinking if we remove all of these annoying, what do you call them, suffixes? Well, why don't we remove time logs, and then these components, if we can call them components, are a lot more reusable.
Yeah, more copy pastable.
Exactly.
I wonder how should we query directly all the time logs? Because we can't. Oh well, I guess we can if we have a project or a group. Start from there.
So yeah, I think we need to enforce that there's some criteria, and we used to do that, but maybe we don't anymore. I think that you should either be filtering on user or project or group or date. There's 3 or 4 things. I think at least one of those should be.
Yeah.
Maybe we don't do that anymore.
Provide at least one argument.
Oh, did it say that? Args empty. Awesome. Yes, we already enforced that on the resolver side. So this is interesting. So I guess we're going to be moving a lot of these filters from the resolver into the finder.
Yes. Should we?
I think
because
so.
the finder might call the methods from the resolver.
I feel like that's backwards in terms of hierarchy or whatever you want to call it. Do you know what I mean? A bit like the back end calling the front end. So,
yeah. I'm just checking the finder that I created for the contacts.
But yeah, I think we can steal a lot of this. So the resolver is server side, but it's what do I call it? Kind of like controller almost. It's the not presentation layer. But yeah, I think that it should be behind that. It will push this stuff to the database, but it's just that it's more, what's the word, disconnected, abstracted than.
Oh yeah, no, I
So I think we just need to move a lot of this stuff into the finder.
Yeah.
Basically. So yeah. The only thing is raise argument error. Yeah, so that's a GraphQL type thing. So we need to send some kind of, I don't know, service response back or something that we can handle here.
I don't know. Do GitLab uses maybe exceptions for that?
I don't think we ever throw an exception and then catch it so that we can present it in a certain fashion. I've certainly not seen that.
Okay.
If I find, contact resolver.
I don't think you should move the validate args into the Finder, though. Should you? The validation is normally done separately to the actual finding of something.
I guess it depends if we want to enforce the same validation regardless of where you're calling. Do you know what I mean? If you're calling it from the REST API versus the GraphQL API versus somewhere randomly in the code.
Mm-hmm. And that's why I don't think it should be in the Finder.
Because you don't think we'd want to enforce that validation?
Because not necessarily don't want to enforce the validation, but the validation may end up different on each of those things. Do any other finders enforce argument validation?
I will try and confirm in a moment.
I don't think so, because even if you think about, for example, ID, if you want to filter something, what was I working on? I don't remember.
Well, yeah, they do, I think would be my answer, because here, if it's not a root group,
that's not validating the argument. The argument is still validated at the resolver.
I don't know. I would say that's validating.
No, it's fetching the group from the argument and then throwing a different kind of error because it's not a root ancestor.
As opposed to
the resolver. The resolver is just checking, I would imagine, it's just checking that you have passed a group like a valid ID in there, like an integer or whatever. And then this is fetching that group and then checking it's a root and a root group or whatever it was. It's not that the Finder isn't checking that you have passed a valid ID in there.
Yeah, but are you still sort of saying that you don't think that we should do the validation in the Finder?
Not for the arguments and what those arguments not what those arguments are, because obviously you need to check that if you pass a group ID in, that is an ID and it's not a bunch of letters. That's you're basically validating that the values that have been passed in are technically
so
allowable.
We don't need to do that because or I don't believe we need to do it because that will happen automatically based on the type.
Yeah.
So we don't need to do that validation.
Also, I just remember that some time ago I saw a resolver that you could pass in two fields, but only one of them at a time, and the validation was done on the resolver and not on the Finder. And that's similar to what we want to do here.
Mutually exclusive. Yeah. I think my thinking is very much that, well, where do we want this validation to? What do we want to apply it to? Do we want to apply it to only GraphQL traffic, or do we want it to apply to the Finder? So anyone trying to find a time log, whether it's via the REST API or some internal mechanism, do we want to apply this validation for everyone or only people consuming it via GraphQL? And my instinct at the moment is that we want it to apply for everyone.
What kind of validation is it doing in those methods then?
So some of the things we do, we check that the end time, if provided, is after the start time. So, we wouldn't want you to say, show me all the time logs from tomorrow until yesterday. What else do we do? Pass, validate. We check there's a legacy start time. So this one we wouldn't have to worry about. This one would definitely be in GraphQL in the resolver, because for some bizarre reason there's a start date and a start time parameter argument. But we would only pass one, I think, to the Finder, or we would only support one in the Finder. It doesn't make sense to have both of them.
Because when you're checking those start date and end dates, are you throwing exceptions or are you just fixing the data?
We are throwing. It's not an exception. It will return.
If the start date is after the end date, does that?
Yeah, so it'll raise an argument error. It won't throw an exception, but it won't return any data. It will return an error message.
Yeah, but this is only for GraphQL.
Is that because the REST endpoints don't support it?
Probably. Very good question.
The problem is that if you want to move this from the resolver to the Finder, how do we know if you want to raise a GraphQL error or something else?
The pattern that I've seen is using service responses as a response from the Finder, and then you can use that as a container to put other data in there.
I think if we can find a Finder that does do that kind of validation elsewhere, then it's probably fine. If not, then I would leave it where it is for now.
Chris, you have thoughts?
Can I ask a few newbie questions, which the actual
far away
here? So, quick understanding here project is that Finder is a layer with REST in the GraphQL, which then says,
Sorry, Chris, I don't know if it's the same for everyone else, but you're breaking up quite a lot.
Yeah.
Let me type.
So I'll try and preempt the question just in case. So the GraphQL layer, you've got the resolver, which in some instances goes directly to kind of the models, which pulls the data from the database. In the good instance, where it's a bit more complex and you've got more sorting and filtering and other options, then you have the Finder, which I would kind of consider, service layer. But that Finder would be shared, so used by various other pieces of back-end code as well. So maybe to drive the REST API, maybe to drive legacy HAML, and various other places. So Finders are shared between different parts of the code. They're not exclusive to GraphQL.
So would that mean that the Finder logic, and if you're saying certain queries you can't query after today, query, then that lives in the Finder?
So I still only caught bits of that. But again, I think you're trying to say exactly what I was suggesting. Anything that we think is a logical validation that you would always want to apply, regardless of, you cannot ask for records between, like with the dates inverted, although part of me wonders whether we should just fix that like Andrew suggested. But yeah, that logically would be a validation in the Finder, because we would always want to apply that validation. Something where maybe we say in GraphQL, we want to force you to provide at least one argument. So that was, why have I lost it? Because I'm in the wrong, no, I'm not in the wrong place. This one, if we say we only want that from GraphQL, we actually want you to be able to call the Finder from elsewhere and provide all time logs with no filters whatsoever, which I do not think will be the case anyway. But if we did, then it makes sense to have it in here. So I guess then that begs the question, like, so what of this stuff? So applying all of these filters, definitely a job of the Finder, all agreed?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Validating the arguments. So these two, I think, should be jobs of the resolver, because this is a legacy weird thing where we accept start date and start time and end date and end time on the resolver, but we wouldn't accept that on the Finder. So I think that should remain, these two checks should remain in the resolver. And the one to make sure you're at least passing one kind of argument, you know, filtering the data in some way. You're not trying to return every time log ever. I think that should be in the Finder as well, because I just can't see a logical reason why you would ever be querying saying, give me every time log ever.
Well,
and if you really, really, really wanted it, you just say start time is the 1970 and end time is the 31st of the 12th, 2050 or something like that, you know.
Yeah.
I have clicked through a bunch of Finders and I can't see any that seem to be doing any kind of validation. They just take things and run things.
Maybe because they are thinking that the things that they are given are already right, so the validation is done beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
Assumptions.
Yeah.
Well, at the end of the day, who are we to make this decision, right? We've discussed it to death. Let's let the reviewers, and maintainers make the decision.
I guess trying to make the decision now is to avoid us having to change it all when they come back and say, actually, don't do any of this. Do it this way instead.
Yes.
If we follow the existing standards, then they're less likely to.
Yeah. Well, on that basis, then maybe my inclination is, well, what I was suggesting is I'm not going to move these two things, right? Because they are specific to the GraphQL endpoint. So I wasn't going to move those anyway. So the only one I was going to move is this one, and it's one. So it's not like a big revamp. All of the applying of the filters, we definitely want to move to the Finder anyway. So I don't think it's hugely contentious or like going to be a load of rework anyway. We'll definitely call it out in the MR. And maybe somewhere else if we want to as well, because sometimes when I come across these things, I do think we can't be the first people to have hit this kind of question or challenge. And the same thing goes, I said, about the service responses. And annoyingly, I can't remember where we do this. I think it's on the mutations. Contact update service. I think on the mutations, we return a service response, because if we were to just return a contact, then it would screw us if we wanted to say, no, you can't do that for some reason. We'd have to throw an error and then we'd have to catch the error. And I don't know if that's the best way. So, but this pattern, maybe I'm wrong, but I want to say like the documentation's a bit thin. So we might need to work on that a little bit. But it seems like the logical way to kind of pass something back from the finder that's got a bit more information than just, hey, here's your results, or here's no results.
Mm-hmm.
So no coding have been done, but
not even 5 minutes.
But I think it's good sounding and good for definitely people to understand our thought process and how it all works and fits together. And I can definitely move forward with creating the finder. Oh, actually, we did. We created the finder. Where's it gone?
We created the finder, but
yeah, I mean, it's still got loads of legacy stuff in there, but
we created the finder file.
Yes, exactly, and pasted some template boilerplate code in there. So,
yeah, it's funny how a simple thing like this can create a discussion that might go on for hours.
I think
talking about documentation, is there anything that you know of that documents what a finder is and what a resolver is, that kind of stuff, like answering Chris's questions from before?
Absolutely. I don't know. Would it be backend style guide, something like that? I saw that there was something.
Oh, maybe under GraphQL, because we're gonna have the resolver in there.
Hey. Okay. Yeah, it's a problem when it gets to this size, the project, it does become quite hard to find stuff. But I think there's a reasonable job. Front end style, API style, guidelines for shell.
Oh, maybe GraphQL API.
Well, if we want to find out what like a finder is supposed to do, but then it is a bit confusing because a lot of models implement sorting and various other searching and finding as well. So finders, here we go. Everything typically used for retrieving data from the database. Finders cannot reuse other finders. Finders execute method should return active record relation. Well, that screws us for what I was suggesting about returning a service response.
There's an issue for more details.
They say should. They don't say must.
True.
I'm not sure if they follow standard guides for those words.
It's surprising. I think this abstraction might be one of those things that's acceptable. I think calling like dot to array or doing something like that might be the problem, as opposed to wrapping the active record collection inside a model like a service response.
Oh, well. I think.
Maybe, yeah, we'll call it quits in a minute, but I'm just going to have a look what exceptions we've actually documented. What one should we find? How about the boards finder? Oh. Does that really make sense to have like a wrapper that just calls if?
Yeah, I think that's what some of the other finders do.
I just don't understand why you would. God knows. So found equals board. Else that if params board ID is present. Why is that? Oh, so this just returns a single board, I think. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, that's a single board or an array of boards.
Yeah, if board ID is present, then it returns a single board. Otherwise, it returns all the boards.
Oh yeah.
So, oh, okay. So if gotcha. Okay, so that's a surprising example, right? That's fine. So this is actually using this bonkers library that we use for backend / API. I think it's for backend for like Haml and stuff, how we do our pagination.
Sorry guys, but I have to call it, and I have to go.
No worries at all. I'll be calling it down in a second as well. Thanks, Marco. Catch you soon.
Okay.
Enjoy your week
Yeah.
off.
Catch you later, Marco. Bye.
Okay. Bye. See you online.
Just reading Chris's comments. Building. So adding the checks is part of building SQL, GraphQL, GQL. I'm not quite sure I follow there.
So instead of calling them validations, call them restrictions. Or yeah. And then when you are adding those checks, you're just filtering the SQL rather than validating the data.
Not validating the data, are they? They're validating the arguments. I suppose I almost see it a little bit like where we validate permissions, which we've been known to do in both finders and in GraphQL resolvers and GraphQL types and about a million other different places. I guess that's to just play it on the safe side, because it's not validating. It's not validating the data. It's just checking that the arguments are like, hang on, are you allowed to retrieve this group, or are you allowed to like retrieve this data, or should you be only allowed to retrieve your own time logs or something like that?
Is more
that hasn't helped, unfortunately. In 21st century and still blooming technology is a pain in the ass. Yes. So, yeah, I'm going to push forward with some code at some point anyway. But I definitely think we highlight this kind of area in the documentation and just say, like, this should be a lot easier, right? We should have some kind of documented, like, I don't know. It's just taking everything for its own merits, right? And saying, like, well, okay, this finder just returns this for this reason, but now that we want to do something else, we need to enhance. But then I suppose we should update the documentation if we change that pattern, if we find that a service response. Okay, let's try this out for size. How many times do we do service response in a finder? I find that hard to believe. Have I made a typo? Maybe not.
I cannot find any references to service response in finders either.
Okay. I guess I'll ask that question before doing it then. What the only other thing I can think of doing, what would you think if we were to put something like
Thinking about it, it's called service response because services return with that response. Checking most of the files, they're all underscore service.
But isn't a finder a service? In my eyes, it is. Just because we've not called it service. Do you know what I mean?
Services tend to be multi, like, I don't know. I can't think how to word it. Like, don't services tend to touch lots of different things? Like, the intention of a service is to bring together a bunch of stuff, so you only have to call the one place to have that propagate out.
Yeah, I don't know, to be honest. Our model that we use here is very much that our service layer is kind of like your business logic-y. It's the stuff that glues together your kind of controllers, you know, GraphQL, front end, whatever you want to call it, and your back end, like data access layer stuff. Our service layer is the bit that sits in the middle. So finders would be in our service layer. As well.
So I would call finders part of the database layer, I guess. But yeah.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Because a service would make use of a finder, but a finder itself isn't a service.
But then I guess my question would be, what's the point of having the finder? Would we not just expose the methods on the model directly to, you know, which we do already. So if I show you the time log model, we already have scope for in group, in project, for user, at or after, at or before. So we already provide methods or scopes to get, you know, all the data out and apply the filters. So why would we put it in a finder versus doing it this way, I guess is my question.
Because the finder pulls all of those together based on some predefined, like, what are they called in Ruby? Hashes, I guess.
Right. So you're saying it abstracts this bit, basically.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's purely
that's it. Pretty much. Yeah.
Okay, we could ask. So that though would then lead me to saying we need a service as well, to then handle like this stuff.
Yes, that's what we're missing. That's probably where it should belong. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
there we go.
I'll reach out and see if that seems to be a desired approach. So we've got the resolver that would do any GraphQL specific stuff. That then calls the service that maybe validates some input and sort of encapsulates any errors and does some other weird stuff. And then the finder that just collates all of the kind of searching and filtering and ordering. And then the model that kind of does that, but doesn't encapsulate it almost.
Yeah. Because then the service can return a service response if there's an issue with the sorting of the dates or whatever.
Awesome. Okay. I'll
there we go. 50 minutes of talking. We finally got there.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's just a case of like, clearly there are scenarios where you skip steps. So there's scenarios where you don't even have a resolver. There's definitely scenarios where you don't have a finder. There's definitely scenarios where you don't have the service. So like, how do we then decide when to implement which ones? But it's awesome that we've come to this kind of, at least theory, that we can then try and get some validation on to move forward.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks for your time. Thanks for joining us, Chris, as well. And look forward to next week. Hopefully I'll tell you I've made some progress.
Yeah, hopefully catch you again as well, Chris. Are you on Discord?
I'm not yet.